share my screen. All right. Hi, hello everyone. So my name is Emile, and I'm starting my fourth year at York in the Geography department. And my thesis is a comparative study of food delivery resistance in Toronto and Paris. And I mean, today I'm going to mostly talk about the Paris case because I feel that we've had some Toronto field work and even in food delivery resistance yesterday. So my field work is in Paris and in Toronto, and I'm going to present to you some of my results. I'm currently writing my thesis, maybe halfway, let's say. And my interviews were conducted with organizers, but also undocumented food couriers in Paris, which is a pretty different phenomenon than in Toronto. And so first, the situation in Paris was recently covered by a super large survey in Europe by the ETUI. They surveyed basically 24,000 workers across 14 countries, and they found that 70% of the riders are aged 44 and below, and that half of them make less than minimum wage. But they didn't really discuss the citizenship aspect of platform food delivery. And in Paris, the case of sans-papier couriers is, when I say sans-papier, I just mean undocumented. And so the number of undocumented workers in Paris is basically impossible to know because the way that you can work undocumented in food delivery in Paris is basically by subletting an account. So it's impossible to know, but I mean, I've been talking to organizers and to other couriers, and they estimate that it might be 1 out of 4, 1 out of 3 even, that is undocumented in Paris. And like in a 2019 New York Times article, one of the Glovo director, it's like another platform in Europe, and he estimated at 5% the number of undocumented worker, which is I mean, it's pretty low. Yeah, so impossible to know how many, but definitely a lot according to the people that I talked to when I was in Paris. And so first, the traditional conceptualization of platform mediated food delivery is that it's precarious work, it's gig work, and it's part of the platform economy. So I mean, we're basically in the smallest section here, and precarious work is usually considered like salary, how long the work is for, health benefits, commute to work, but there's another aspect of precarity that is rarely mentioned, and it's the citizenship aspect. And like platform food delivery, especially in Paris, has a lot to do with citizenship and papers. And so another way to conceptualize precarity is the redistribution of state protection to workers, and the undocumented workers in Paris that are doing food delivery are under tremendous precarity, notably like housing. They cannot have bank accounts. They and so on and so forth. Like there's so many layers of precarity that are added to riders that it makes this conceptualization of precarity like really the citizenship aspect really important. So another here from the same article by Tucker is this tripartite relationship between consumers, workers, the restaurant, and the platform. And here, what I'm proposing to look at is two other relations basically between the worker that owns the account on the platform and the worker that is subletting the account, and also the relationship between the migrant worker and the state. And so there are basically like two ways you can work undocumented for a food platform. Is that you're either hired by the platform directly, and so that means that the platform is going to hire you only with your passport, or you can sublet an account from someone, and that's done through either like groups or Facebook groups or just like neighborhoods. And so what I'm asking today is how is the traditional like exploitation of migrant workers in urban areas different with the platformization phenomenon? So so I divided like my literature review in like these two dimension, and it's to look at it through like the urban lens and to look at it through the labor lens. And first I was super inspired by critical urban studies and the techno-scientific management of cities, which is like the technological change in urbanization is also it plays a huge role here. So you have the whole literature on platform urbanism, but also going all the way back to like Henri Lefebvre and stuff. And then you have another perspective in the urban dimension, which is post-colonial or decolonial urban studies, which sees the city as like an important site for migration, and the borders as like a mechanism of exploitation, notably through the citizenship aspect. And then for the labor dimension, you have feminist scholarships that argue that the privatization of different social reproduction aspect like meals, food delivery is becoming platformized, and it's a class issue that some groups, some even even like spatially distributed, can afford this privatization of social production, and some of the groups can't. And then finally, labor geography, which is key in this specific issue, because the traditional unions play a really important role in the organization of migrant workers. So now for my case study, how and why did the sans-papier couriers came to organize strikes across Paris? Well, it first started in the summer of 2020. And the protests were organized by the workers for this company called Frishti. And the company decided to deactivate without notice 200 of its riders, because they said that they were sans-papier. I did 3 or 4 interviews with Frishti riders, and they all said that the company hired them only with their home country's passport. So most of them are from West Africa, and they were hired by Frishti only with their passport. And then during the whole pandemic, because the orders were like, the number of orders were crazy, they delivered during like the whole spring, and then in the summer the company decided to deactivate all of them. So they decided to strike. And the way that Frishti works is that they have hubs in like the most central neighborhoods of Paris, and so these riders, they blocked the main hubs in the city, and they demanded like visa or temporary work visa for the work that they did. The company eventually had to negotiate with the state, and they give to 100 out of the 200 workers a temporary visa. And then in the fall of 2021 too, you had strikes by Stuart, which is another platform, in the same punitive measures, deactivations, and also pay cuts. And the undocumented riders decided to strike. I have another one here. And so the case of Stuart is really interesting too, because it's a platform that is state-owned. Like the platform is owned by the bank La Poste, which is state-owned, and so the case of sans-papier strikes is really historical, because here you have a platform that is state-owned, and you have undocumented workers that are working for a state-owned company, but the way that they become undocumented is through various very confusing migration policies. You have failed asylums, you have rescue programs, youth programs, and so the state is definitely creating undocumented workers, and then here in this case they profit off the work of the undocumented that they themselves created. This book, On bosse ici, on reste ici, which means we work here, we stay here, traces the history of sans-papier strikes in France, and they note that, and this is like even before platformization, they note similar aspects to this case, which is hypocrisy of the employers, because they hired a sans-papier and then they say that they didn't know, and then they fired them. The role of traditional union, like the CGT, which has been implicated for decades in migrant resistance, and then interdependency with the regularized. And this is the last aspect that I'm going to discuss quickly, which is how the subletting of account works. So sometimes you have to pay, but I mean, you have to rent the account to someone, and it's usually like 100, 120, sometimes 200 euros per week. And so you add that the e-bike rental, the bus pass, the RER pass, because most of them, they like couch surf in the suburbs. And so this financial precarity creates a situation where these undocumented workers have to work, like they have to stay online 6-7 days per week from like noon to midnight, and they stay online, but the online time when you don't deliver is unpaid, and so every order that they get, they have to accept, and it's like they're basically like online, unpaid, and ready to deliver like as far and as fast as possible for these companies. So in conclusion, first, the platformization and like its resistance is definitely it's anchored in the socio-historical context where they occur, and the undocumented riders are essential to the profits, because as I showed, it's like the layers of precarity that are all adding up are creating this like pool of workers that is basically like a gold mine for platforms. And then finally, the labor platform. I didn't talk about this too much, but in my interviews, it's really it plays an important role in the migration journey of these workers. And I think I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop here. So if you have any questions, I'm looking forward to the discussion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me here, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Cohen, for being here to question us. And yeah, this is more so just a PhD proposal for me, because I'm in my first year of my PhD, and so I hope I can get some good comments and feedback back. So I am a PhD student at York University's Political Science Department, and my research project I'm currently calling Cyborg Sex Workers, and I want to research the digital alternatives that sex workers have accessed in the age of their criminalization. So My main research question is, what role does technology have in the self-organizing and self-determining practices of full-service sex workers? And by full-service sex workers, I mean sex workers who provide an in-person service to clients. And so my objectives in this research are to first investigate the extent, range, and methods that sex workers are actually utilizing online, and then hopefully be able to evaluate those methods and see if it can promote better consultation with full service sex workers and navigating the legal regulation. And ultimately, I just want to ensure that everyone's aware that I'm starting from a foundation that sex work, full service sex work is work. I am keeping with the definition that was proposed in the 1980s by Kaileigh. Ultimately, that sex work is dignified, it's worthy of labor rights, and the umbrella term of sex work has really been an identity for sex workers to advance their interests in different ways. So yeah, this is ultimately the definition that different sex work advocacy organizations have adopted as well. So the current landscape for sex workers in Canada was mostly impacted by the 2014, oh my goodness. I don't know how to get out of here. I'm so sorry.
Everything looks good on our end.
Oh, really? Okay,
I can just see your presentation.
Okay, cool. I had
the Bill C-36 slide.
Okay, perfect. I'll just continue there. I'll ignore this pop-up. Yeah, so the current landscape for full service sex workers was mostly impacted by the 2014 Bedford case, which created Bill C-36, the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, which decriminalized the actual sale of sex. So being able to be a sex worker is no longer illegal. However, it criminalizes all of the auxiliaries that are necessary to that work. So things like purchasing offense, advertising offenses, material benefit offenses, communication offenses, so on and so forth. So there's many folks who are against this, and they take up the camp of the decriminalized model. They think that if we remove the criminalization of their work, it will allow them to just create better conditions and rights and safety for sex workers. So it would give them the ability to openly communicate and advertise. They can do things like negotiate services with their clients, negotiate their prices, just pursue better screening standards. They'd be able to work with different groups of sex workers without fear of arrest. They would be able to have bargaining power with different agency or spa owners, and ultimately they'd just be able to work together in different capacities. And so I want to talk about, despite the fact that sex work is criminalized, I think that sex workers have engaged in this thing that I'm calling the digital takeover. So sex workers have acted counter to the advertising and communication offenses under Bill C-36. They've been able to online market, they've been able to online screen, and ultimately have found different avenues of solidarity and networking. So I see advertisement streams as sort of twofold. The first are just basic advertisement and review forums. This way, providers, sex workers are able to acquire different clients and also post their screening methods for their clients. And the second one is social media, primarily Twitter. And that's going to be my area of focus, because not only does it allow for a different client range and different screening methods, but it also encourages networking and solidarity among sex workers. So why I chose Twitter, just with preliminary research, I noticed that Twitter is definitely the most popular social media website that's utilized for service promotion. And it also offers sort of a flexible, like the content moderation is quite flexible, meaning sex workers can post things that aren't explicitly pornographic that are going to get them kicked off Twitter. And so they've sort of been able to develop a roundabout way of advertising their services on there. And just given the global nature of Twitter, sex workers are able to establish a pretty broad client reach. And then they're also able to post things such as their lived experience. So things beyond advertisements, things like their political views, their day-to-day, that sort of thing. So my theoretical foundation and why I'm calling this Cyborg is namely inspired by Andrew Feenberg's critical theory of technology. According to Feenberg, technology is profoundly connected to questions of social power. And so in my case, I think Feenberg would say that sex workers are utilizing tools of technology, and this ultimately sort of represents an extension of democracy. And so we should really focus on it and potentially see what it could offer for political outcomes and understanding the political moves that sex workers have made. So keeping that in mind, my methodology will sort of be twofold, and I hope to be pursuing them sort of at the same time. So I want to pursue a qualitative digital content analysis of Twitter. I want to be able to first understand how sex workers have actually engaged with these third-party advertisers, and different clients, primarily from 2014. That's when Bill C-36 came out, to the present, 2022, and so on and so forth, however long I am pursuing this research. I want to be able to identify the actual words that they're saying in posts. I want to be able to define the purpose of those words and ultimately be able to do things like code those concepts, things like their schedule, their personal anecdotes, networking, their potential reference to other websites. And I think this combined with qualitative interviews and a thematic analysis of those interviews could provide me with really good insight about how sex workers are utilizing social media and what it could mean for potential political inspiration about what to do legally for sex workers. Yeah, so I think this research is pretty much needed right now. I think that first and foremost, it would legitimize their social advancements. I mean, right now you have lots of research and literature that focuses on the need to decriminalize sex work because whatever it be health reasons, legal reasons, social stigma reasons that are affecting sex workers. But I think it will be important to show that despite criminalization, sex workers have actually found an empowered avenue. And given this sort of nuanced and partial relationship that sex workers have with the law, we'll be able to understand the potential regulation that they need. And also, I think it's just important that a lot of anything written about the way sex workers are accessing technology, namely exists in personal blog forums, news articles, that sort of thing. So there's not much actual academic literature written on this. And much like with any type of research, I of course have concerns that I hope to address throughout my time researching this. Things like how will I ensure an ethical ethnography, questions of whether or not decriminalization is the best way forward. So if that exposure would be a good thing for sex workers, and whether or not sex workers actually want their bodies and their work regulated. Also the fact that different sex workers have different experiences within sex work. So I'll have to be able to be representative of BIPOC sex workers, queer sex workers, and not just one sort of small sample size. And I guess the most important one that I'm sort of stuck on is the access to data. So Twitter is quite challenging to extract data from just because they are sort of a closed platform, and it often takes something like a financial contribution to be able to get data from Twitter. And so I think that's something that I'm going to have to work out and really work on to be able to extract a decent amount of data from Twitter. But yeah, this is everything. And thank you so much for listening. And I'm looking forward to any questions.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm Véronique Sioufi. I'm a doctoral candidate in geography at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, currently writing my thesis. And I'm working on a labor geography of microwork in Canada and Tunisia, which I didn't include the Tunisia part in my abstract originally because I wasn't sure that I would be this far along enough, but I think that I am. So this will be a very broad overview of this ongoing project with some key details highlighted, but feel free to ask me any other questions at the end, of course. So there's a subfield in geography called critical data studies, which critically examines the data economy through a spatial lens. And this is a concern for the way the data we produce through our digital devices is captured for profit and how algorithms operate with kind of biased impunity with that data. So while this field is mapping out these routes of data dispossession, I wanted to look at the work of microtasking within this context. Because the data we produce still requires processing to be useful to machine learning algorithms. They need to learn from pre-sorted, pre-tagged data, and then their success needs to be assessed by human eyes. And this work is often broken down into its smallest dividable task and outsourced or crowdsourced via web-based labor platforms to be completed by supposedly anyone, anywhere for pennies per click. So my aim was to bring together geographers' mappings of the structures of power in the big data economy with concerns for the geographically and historically situated experiences of those doing microwork or clickwork, if you want to call it that, in that data economy. In other words, is this work being done by anyone, anywhere, or by particular people in particular places? So I'm taking up labor geography's recent turn towards an infrastructural lens to pursue this research question. Labor geography is a field that focuses on workers' agency in the shaping of space and on the enabling and constraining structures that agency faces. And in a recent series of progress reports on labor geography, Kendra Strauss, my supervisor, suggests that the infrastructural turn offers possibilities for exploring uneven and highly unequal socio-spatial forms of precarity. So this is quite useful to me because both critical data studies and studies of microwork come together on this infrastructural view of the data economy. So geographers have focused on materializing the digital as infrastructure and mapping the way power operates through that infrastructure. And then studies of microwork point to the systematically hidden work involved in maintaining that infrastructure. Geographers have demonstrated the way that big data systems rely on and reproduce socio-spatial differentiations, and then existing microwork studies show that platforms operationalize that difference, particularly operationalize non-white devaluation, as Polito might call it, in the distribution of data work. So looked at together, these factors point to a kind of precarity trap where this type of gig work sustains the pressures imposed by broader forms of precaritization, particularly racialization. And these literatures both point to control of data infrastructures being geographically concentrated and the data production, both paid and unpaid, being more diffuse in a dynamic that mirrors colonialism, with data infrastructures facilitating a value transfer from the global south to the global north. And as with colonialism, this process relies on both dispossession and proletarianization because the data economy is not only about producing the product data, but also about owning the spaces where data can be generated, collected, analyzed, and applied. So from the literal ground to the metaphorical cloud. And in this light, corporate projects to expand digital infrastructures in the global south start to look like efforts both to capture the labor of data production from the use of digital devices, as well as produce an infrastructure-ready pool of labor for cleaning and processing that data. So I'd like to explore some of microtaskers' different experiences of precarity and agency across various points of these data infrastructures. So in my case, the two sites in my study are Canada and Tunisia. Canada ranks high as both a buyer and supplier of digital work, which in other words means while it's a wealthy nation in the global north, its digital economy relies on underpaid workers, not only abroad, but also at home. The Canadian Quality of Work and Economic Life study from 2020 found that 1 in 8 Canadians are engaged in platform work. And of those, workers were 4 times more likely to be engaged in online crowd work than in ride sharing work, such as driving for Uber. But little is known about Canadians' experience of microwork or the role of this work in their economic lives beyond these numbers. So I'd like to know who in Canada are those that turn to this kind of work despite its low pay and why. And then Tunisia, for its part, also has significant numbers of people participating in the labor market in the digital labor market more broadly. It's also been the focus of international financial institutions and European efforts to expand digital skills, as they call them, in funding projects and discourses that mirror those that position places like Nigeria and Kenya as centers for US business process outsourcing in the early 2000s and before. The World Bank, France, and Germany, for example, have participated in investment projects with the aim of putting Tunisia's highly educated yet underemployed youth to work in the digital economy. So while young, educated Tunisian men, particularly those with programming degrees, many of them have been leaving the country to work in France and Germany's tech sectors, young women graduating from Tunisian universities have been less likely to secure work abroad or more likely to choose to stay in Tunisia. And so they face the highest unemployment rates at home at 40%. And as a result, we see some crowdsourcing platforms like Paris-based Microwork platform Is a Hit, for example, particularly target educated unemployed women in French-speaking African countries in their recruiting efforts. Because as a former French colony, continuing close cultural ties to France and education still standardized in line with the French curriculum, Tunisia is well positioned to provide support for that French companies might be looking for in terms of AI and data processing. But young Tunisians are also increasingly learning English and may also be in a position to work in Anglophone data markets. So I'm interested here not only in who is engaging in microtasking, but also for whom. So my research design was comprised of 4 primary research questions: who is doing microwork in these 2 countries, why, what agency do they have in these digital workspaces, and what are their experiences and understanding of algorithmic management, both on and off these crowdwork platforms. And I pursued this through surveys, interviews, and discussion forum observations. For Canada, I ran a 50-question survey on Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is one of the largest microwork platforms globally. I ran that between May and June this year, and I got 300 responses. And the survey included a recruitment question for the interviews, so I've interviewed 26 people. My intention was to follow up the interviews with observations of the discussion forums where workers might trade tips and tricks about microtasking. I know from American research that this is a key way workers overcome the opacity of platforms' algorithms, overcome their isolation from one another, and figure out what the rules are on the platform and how to succeed. And importantly, the instances of gig worker organizing that we're seeing more broadly often start with workers coming together in group chats or forums online. But what I found is that while Canadian microtaskers do rely on the forums as a source of information to kind of get them going, they don't feel like they belong to this community. They're not active participants on these forums. In the interviews, people describe the forums as being for real microtaskers who do this work full time, who are trying to make a living from this. But from my survey, that seems to make up less than 2% of people microtasking from Canada. The typical Canadian microtasker is someone that was possibly looking for a flexible way to earn money from home, perhaps in their spare time, although many would have been willing to commit more time to it if the pay was higher, if the work was more regular, because their existing household income was falling short of meeting either their immediate needs or ability to plan for a secure future. But after discovering how low the pay is, and we're talking sometimes $1 for an hour of work, and how inconsistent the availability of the work is, their view of what the platform could be to them changed. What they describe as what keeps them coming back to the platform despite these challenges is the ease of access, the flexibility of earning extra money without the commitments of a part-time job. It's work that they can do, as one interviewee put it, between loads of laundry. And to justify the low pay, the people I interviewed typically thought of this work as replacing wasted time scrolling through Facebook or playing Candy Crush, and often earmark the money for very specific purchases, such as, this goes to the internet bill, or this is for Christmas gifts or for cat food. Many mused that the platform must be designed with an international worker in mind, where these low wages could do a lot more. So this could potentially be the case for Tunisians, but there are so many barriers in the way to that kind of success. And these were barriers that also impacted my research process. So leaning on Mechanical Turk for the Canadian research made things quite easy, because Mechanical Turk is not only the largest site, but it also doesn't directly mediate between clients and workers. So it's one of the only platforms where workers can be reached without having to go through managers who may have a direct stake in keeping workers inaccessible to academics and journalists. So I posted the survey on MTurk for people located in Tunisia for months and received no response, and Amazon support could not explain why. I tried to create accounts on Clickwork and Microworkers to post my survey there, but I wasn't approved to have an account. And this was my first glint as to what it's like to participate in the microtasking labor market from a Tunisian IP address. So after this, identifying myself as a researcher, I started posting some questions directly on Reddit and Facebook, as well as a popular Tunisian discussion forum. And on our MTurk and other similar platform-specific Reddit pages, I asked if there were any Tunisians that worked on these websites, and on Tunisian forums, particularly those focused on finding online work, I asked whether anyone participated in microtasking work. Then when I left Tunisia this summer for a few months, I was suddenly able to get a Microworkers account, where my survey has had some success now. So I've gotten 100 responses over the months of August and September. And some of those respondents have also signed up to participate in interviews, which have just started. So in the meantime, through this engagement on the forums and through the survey, I got some key information about these challenges faced by those in Tunisia trying to access these sites. So people told me that, first of all, most of the microtasking websites that claim to be international, in other words, available to anyone, anywhere, do not accept Tunisians on the platform. On one Tunisian forum, there was a lengthy thread of people sharing their Mechanical Turk rejections. Clickwork, Microworkers, and MTurk's websites all claim that they're available to Tunisian workers, but from what I've seen on these discussion forums, the acceptance rate seems to be quite low and unpredictable. A possible explanation for this is that platforms are known to kind of open and close access to workers in particular places as they're needed, kind of like turning on the tap. The second major challenge faced by those who have been accepted to the platform is the inability to have any income they earn online transferred to their Tunisian bank account because of the isolation of the country's banking system. So MTurk offers them Amazon.com gift cards, but Amazon doesn't operate in Tunisia. So, one person that works on MTurk said, for example, that they use the funds to send small items to their family in other countries. Other platforms offer PayPal payments, which workers can use to buy digital goods such as games, apps, or music. The platform Microworkers offers Tunisians payments through Payoneer, but that company offers Tunisians EU or US bank accounts where they can collect funds, but to withdraw these funds, workers have to purchase a banking card, which itself can only be paid for in euros or dollars, which they are not likely to have in the first place. So the preference on Tunisian work from home online Facebook groups seem to be for more reliable and regular work offered by people locally. And when asked if they knew other people that did microtasking, the people that answered me pointed to Tunisian business process outsourcing firms that offer microtasking as their main service, but require more formal employment relationships with workers. So a full-time 9-to-5 position at a physical office in Tunis or Sfax, those are the popular sites, for example. So going forward, I will expand my research to explore what microtasking and data work looks like in these BPO offices. But we already know from this that this model of work removes the one benefit of microtasking that all the Canadian workers had pointed to, which is the flexibility of the work, the ability to do it from home in between loads of laundry. So while Tunisians seem to have stronger online communities around digital work, they seem to have very limited access to the promised independence and flexibility of microwork. And then while Canadians have access to that flexibility, the cost of living in Canada means that the income they earn can't do much more than cover the cost of cat food, which in turn dissuades them from seeing themselves as part of any digital work community. What they have in common so far is that they're all after the promised benefits of being able to do flexible work by anyone, anywhere, but even in these early stages of the research, I'm already seeing that this work is not available in the same way to everyone everywhere. And yeah, thank you.
So, hello everyone. My name is Zanta, and I am a third-year undergraduate student at York University. And I will be presenting my topic titled "Beaten for Likes: Cyber-Aggression Experiences of Content Creators." Now, this project really highlights the toxic environment that many creators are usually exposed to. We're going to talk about how majority of them do fall victim to cyber-aggression. And while this job does seem very glamorous and captivating from an outside perspective, we're going to dive a bit deeper to uncover the troubling situations that some content creators have been put through. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. I will start off by giving a really brief background summary of content creators and their work, some of the past research that has been conducted, what methods I have used to conduct my studies, the results that I've found, and lastly, the discussion. Next slide, please. Okay. So, as you all know, online content creation is a rapidly growing sector for many gig workers. It has contributed to over $100,000 in revenue for full-time creators in this year alone. And the market for social media creators is actually estimated to reach $16.4 billion. And we know that more people are gravitating towards this type of gig work, especially on popular platforms like TikTok and YouTube. The revenue contribution will continue to grow as more people join these platforms. And while there are many benefits to this job, there's no denying that creators are regularly exposed to cyber-aggression. And that's over 200 million influencers who have faced some sort of online hostile harassment. Next. So content creators can be defined as individuals who create content to be shared and accessed through online media platforms. And cyber-aggression is the use of online platforms to inflict intentional harm to others. Next slide. So based on some past research, we learned that those who participate in cyber-aggression has often fallen victim to peer rejection. And because they can say, whatever they want behind a screen without others knowing who they are, they tend to display more aggressive behaviors towards others because they know that there won't be any consequences. Research has also shown that cyber-aggression is widely used to shame breakers of social norms. Next slide. We noticed that literature is missing how cyber-aggression has affected the victims themselves. And so the goal of our study is to develop a better understanding of cyber-aggression towards these gig workers and how these constant harsh comments have affected their psychological state and how that in turn is going to affect their work and their productivity. Next slide. So this is our research question. We really try to understand how content creators experience cyber-aggression. Now, of course, everyone's experience is very different. So to answer this question, we use the following methods. Next slide. To gather our data, we conducted an hour-long interview with 13 participants, and we asked them a series of questions that was related to their online occupation and how cyber-aggression has, affected them mentally, socially, and how it has affected their role as a creator. It was really important for us to choose creators from different niches, such as academic teachers. We also interviewed a comedy personnel, bloggers, and so on. Our interviewees fell in the age range of early 20s to late 30s, and we had a 9:4 ratio of males to females. Next. So our criteria for interviewing were mainly aimed at creators who had at least 1,000 followers on any platform and have labeled themselves a victim of cyber-aggression. We also made a recruitment post online, and we kept notes of potential participants who has fulfilled our criteria, and we also kept track of their niche, their following, and the type of content that they post. Personally, I used TikTok to help find these participants because it was really easy to locate emerging creators and really successful ones. It was also really beneficial because their other social medias would usually be linked to their TikTok account, which made communicating and interacting with them easier. So essentially, I found the participants on TikTok, and I directly messaged them on Instagram because it did have a higher response rate than just emailing. And I found that usually for every 20 individuals that I messaged, I would get a response from at least 5 who did show interest in the project and has agreed to be interviewed. Next slide. And these interviews were semi-structured, and it was recorded on Zoom with cameras off just to protect the identity of the creators. Zoom did auto-transcribe our interviews, but later we listened to the interviews and we edited the audio transcriptions for any inaccuracies. Next slide, please. So I will present our initial analytical approach, but these are the preliminary findings. We worked with the first 6 interviews and we listened to them several times while I made note of some really important occurrences. My supervisor then reviewed them and we discussed any disagreements that we may had, and I will present them as themes today. But please note that these are our very early findings. Next slide. Based on our preliminary findings, we understand that creators are under constant pressure to appear desirable to their audience. So this would include their physical appearances, their body image, their sexuality, and even their identity. And despite their content having nothing to do with these factors at all, creators are rightfully worried since they have been programmed this way due to constant criticism. And it has also led to many long-term issues such as anorexia, and is often accompanied by really high levels of anxiety, low self-esteem, and perfectionism. And more often than not, inappropriate comments are being made about creators. Commenters will state that they're really unattractive, that they're too big, too small, and so on. And unfortunately, many creators are used to these kind of judgments and have heard a lot worse. As a result, these comments can cause body dysmorphia as well as long-term mental health issues. Next slide. In a more serious case, Some viewers have attempted to sabotage creators in a more personal manner. So this includes tactics used to disturb the livelihood of influencers through real-life measures. For example, making false accusations and getting creators into legal trouble. So not only will this damage their reputation, but it also creates a domino effect that can affect their brand sponsorship and inevitably their income. And this is especially true for smaller creators who depend on sponsorships and advertisement. We know that if false accusations continue to spread, eventually these brand deals will fall apart, and it just takes that much longer and that much more effort to get a person back to their initial position. And in some scenarios, it's almost impossible to rebuild one's reputation if the audience already has a fixed negative impression on you. In a more serious case, creators are forced to take a break from all social media platforms just to protect themselves and their families. So there was an example when a YouTuber had to deal with their hacked social media accounts, and at the same time, they received an alarming amount of death threats. Shockingly, these situations are not very rare. The famous YouTube personnel got a big bomb threat called to his house during one of his live streams, and the SWAT team actually barged in and detained him. Now, just imagine the trauma that this person had to go through, and worse, it was online in front of thousands of people to witness. Of course, this has a lasting effect on their image, and it could ruin their reputations. And believe it or not, there are many similar situations ranging from, random death threats online to getting government officials arresting them. Next slide, please. Another interesting theme found was the effects of cyber-aggression on creators' close personal relationships. Cyber-aggression has damaged the creators' relationship with their friends, their families, and even their significant others due to doubtful perceptions of themselves and others. So in our study, a YouTube couple was receiving continuous backlash where mass commenters were stating that the partners were not suitable for each other. And as a result of persistent judgments from thousands of people, it made them question their own relationship. And when the couple finally realized the harm intended by these comments and how it started to cloud their authentic feelings for each other, they decided to take a break from work indefinitely. So this example goes to show that comments like these can destroy not only relationships, but even careers. And the YouTuber couple actually had over 1 million subscribers. And even though it's been over a year, they are still not ready to come back because they're fearful that these comments will continue to persist. Our data shows that the more subscribers or followers a creator have, hate comments will inevitably follow. This is really important because even though the numbers are very important, and as a creator, you would want to have a steady growth in followers and to push out as much content as possible. The truth is, creators worry when the numbers of followers get too high. They know that they're exposing themselves to potential hostile reactions, and when it does reach to that point, many choose to give up their careers. Next, please. Is my time up?
Yeah, let's wrap it up, Zanta. I don't know about the time, but you're almost done.
Yeah, just got about a minute left, but we're also going to have a Q&A session, so perhaps you can pose your discussion, raise your discussion topics here, and then we can take it up in the Q&A later.
So just to summarize, online content creation is a growing type of gig work, and it is a major source of income for thousands of people. And as a result, they are regularly exposed to cyber aggression, which is the display of intentional hostile behavior through online means. And these ill-intended comments and actions towards creators do put them in a really bad mind space, which usually leads to long-lasting mental health issues that sometimes forces them to quit their work altogether. And this is the last slide. Hopefully, future researchers can use our research as a base and further build on it to initiate a theory on cyber aggression in online gig work. We know that only when more research is conducted will social media platforms really understand the seriousness of cyber aggression. And hopefully it will push them to revise their safety policy and even offer services to these gig workers who might need it. Okay, thank you for listening.